The Hunter in Hollow Knight is a character we know a surprisingly lot about. So sit back and relax while we take a deep dive into the Hunter in Hollow Knight. When we first stumble across him in Greenpath, he recognises us as a fearless hunter and gives us his journal. He then asks us to prove ourselves worthy of his mark. He also calls us Little Squib whenever we talk to him for some reason. The knight is small and all, but still. When we finally complete the whole journal, spoilers here by the way, he calls it impressive, says we've proven ourselves a master of killing, and that we're now a true hunter. He then proceeds to break the ground and show us the cave that he lives in, along with the true size of his body. He then fights us. Okay, I'm just kidding. He just gives us Hunter's Mark. However, we find out most of the Hunter's background from the notes he's written in his journal, so I'll go from the start to the finish of any interesting information there is in the journal. Throughout most of these, he's simply commenting on how strong or weak the enemy is, and his thoughts on killing them and how to do it. He also kinda roasts some of the enemies, like saying that the Grozzers seem like they search for ways to die, and I'm pretty sure they're not doing that. The first inside information we get on the Hunter is what his parents may have been like, or just generally his beliefs on parenting, as he mentions how the Aspid mother is appalling, and how it's shameless using us young as a weapon. However, he goes on to say how he admires the resourcefulness, and that good hunters do not always make good parents. He also enjoys snapping these guys' horns off, which I find quite funny. He mentions how the bugs of old Hallownest were weak, and that's why their kingdom crumbled into dust and faded away. Which I guess makes sense in a way, as their weakness made them easily vulnerable to the infection, though I'm not quite sure it's the whole reason of Hallownest's downfall. He also mentions how he looked inside an entombed husk and saw something terrible, not quite sure what he was on about. The Hunter goes down a strange route when talking about lifeblood. Right after he mentions how it tastes nice and makes you feel stronger, he wonders how his own innards would taste. But what's worse is he asks if it would be a heinous thing to try to drink some. He says how he plays bowling with the boulders as well, which is actually quite funny. And with the elder boulders, he talks about how they have more carefree times when escaping the world, which is quite sad, honestly. When talking about the moss creep, he mentions how he'll hunt down and how he'll kill any living thing he finds. Nature of the hunt, I suppose. He says how it's a strange thought to spend your life hiding or fleeing, though for the hunter I would say this thought is far from strange. He also agrees with the Fall Eater's name, which is funny as I'm pretty sure every one of us has been fooled by these plants once before. We find out that the hunter literally eats anything he finds when he mentions the taste of the Golka. Well, he does hunt for a reason and food is probably a big part of it. He mentions how he's alone and wonders how it feels to be in the pack as well, when talking about the Masterflies, though we'll speak a lot more about his loneliness later on in the video. When talking about the Moss Charger, he mentions how he understands the desire to camouflage oneself, which I suppose is what his leaves are for, though how the hell is he camouflaging when he has a whole massive body underneath? That makes no sense to me. Wait, how does he even get around, like, Greenpath when he's this massive? I guess he'd have to crawl through the tunnels or something, I don't know. He questions a lot of random things, like where the acid comes from. However, if you spend your whole life in Hallownest, I suppose there isn't a lot of things to wonder about. He also says how nothing is ever safe, and to teach the Duranda, so at least he's trying to help the bugs of Hallownest, I guess. Apparently, a hunter can lose all his sense in Teacher's Archives, though luckily we don't have any of those. I mentioned earlier how the hunter hunts alone, and he tells us why when talking about the fungling. When I was young, my brothers and sisters and I would hunt each other in the nest. Now I hunt alone. This is probably the coldest line in the whole of Hollow Knight, to be honest. This obviously means that he killed all of his siblings. Though what does he mean by nest? Is that the cave he lives in, a place in Hallownest, or somewhere completely different, maybe in another kingdom? Let me know what you think. Also, if you guys are enjoying the video, please subscribe. My goal is 10k and I'd really appreciate it. We also have a Discord server that you can join as well. Back to the video. He says about how there's a lesson in making the spores kill themselves, though I don't really know what the hell he means by this. He also says how he cut a Shroomal Ogre open, not sure how he did that or where his massive knife is. It seems like he really likes his lessons, as when talking about the Mantis youth, he says about how adulthood is celebrated, but as time goes by, we realise what we've actually lost, which is quite true. Apparently, the Follies in Soul Sanctum search for immortality, though I don't know where he heard this. He also mentions how he doesn't know what soul is, but it makes the corpses taste nice, so I guess it's a bit like lifeblood in a way. He again mentions how pathetic Hallownest's bugs are, and how the kingdom was destined for ruin. He also mentions how he feels shameful for hunting down the cowardly husks, so I guess he can feel some remorse for hunting down everything in its path. He calls the gluttonous husk the shape of an overripe fruit, which is quite funny. He says how the cry of a hatchling for its mother is a beauty. This guy is quite a bit insane. The Grey Husk Sentry is actually the first enemy he compliments on its strength. He again wonders more about himself and his insides, asking what will come out of him when he dies, like the weird orange bugs do with the Watcher Knights. When on about Dung Defender, he mentions the nature of a true hunter again, and says how it's for his own sake, not for any title, honour or glory. He calls the Shard Mite boring as well, which I think is just a bit out of pocket, you know, like what? That's quite a bit mean to the enemy. I think there's probably more boring enemies in the game, but you know. He supposes it's possible to lose anything if you really try, and I think that he just says random stuff on some of these when there isn't much to say about the enemy. He also says how he's never seen the Brooding Morlek, so I guess he hasn't killed or even seen every enemy in this journal, which is quite surprising to me. He also questions about the vessels, saying he's seen them before, which would make sense as the corpses of vessels are scattered around throughout Hallownest. When it comes to Primal Aspids, he talks about how he hopes his children are stronger than him. However, on Obolobbles he mentions how no mate has ever come forth to stay by his side, so I'm not sure on how he plans to reproduce. He also says how he has no tribe of his own, when talking about Domance's traitor. And when talking about Traitor Lord, he discusses his thoughts on the desire to take the infection into himself and become stronger, a choice many bugs have chosen to pursue. Again, with the thing of being alone, the hunter, when on about the God Tamer, says about how he tried to train a beast to join him hunting prey. However, he couldn't resist the urge to test his companion's strength against his own. He also says how hunting Zote gives him no pleasure, which is quite funny and makes a lot of sense. When talking about the Abyss and the sibling, he mentions how he hasn't been down there, but that he will hunt it. And later on he mentions how he easily killed the Void Tendrils. Earlier on he also mentions how he must hunt every creature, so I'm guessing he wrote this journal as he was going through, killing every enemy in Hallownest as he saw them. He actually also says how he's seen Hornet, however she escaped after he lunged at her, and that she might also be a hunter. He also makes a comment on how evil the Pale King is when talking about the sacrifices he made to the Hollow Knight, and when talking about the Radiance, he says how us mere mortals will never understand the source of the infection. When talking about the Shade, he says that each of us leave an imprint of something when we die, a stain on the world, and that he doesn't know how much longer this kingdom can bear the weight of so many past lives. And finally, for the last entry, he says how he has no offspring, subjects, or worshippers, and he leaves the sum of his being, his learning, his instincts, all to us, the Knight. In conclusion, the Hunter is a very strange character who has some very strange thoughts, being in Hallownest for quite a while, I imagine. He says how Hallownest was destined to fall because of the weak bugs scattered all about. He must have come from another area, hunted in Hallownest, and he bides his time before his next hunt begins, in another area. As he says himself, a true hunter has no home, no kingdom, and I'm eager for new prey. This is a different type of video from normal, so let me know what you think. Subscribe, join the Discord, and goodbye.